The box wasn't supposed to be heavy. It was just a kitchen cabinet, his mother had said on the phone. Some old papers, some things she'd been meaning to go through for years. Nothing urgent. But her back had been bothering her and she couldn't reach the high shelf anymore. And if Marcus happened to be coming by this weekend, maybe he could take a look. He happened to be coming by. He always happened to be coming by when she called, which was not a complaint and not even really something he'd analyzed. It was just the shape of his Saturdays, had been since he'd moved back to Columbus 6 years ago, that some portion of them ended up in his mother's kitchen. He pulled the first box down from the top shelf without looking at it. It was heavier than he expected. "What's in this?" he said. "Papers," his mother called from the living room. "Some old notebooks." "I don't know. I stopped looking in there years ago." He set it on the kitchen table and pulled the next box down, and that one was lighter. Just some appliances she'd been storing, a food processor she'd stopped using, a hand mixer from the 80s that still worked fine. He set those on the counter and came back to the box of papers. He should have just asked her what she wanted to do with it. Keep or donate or throw away. Those were the options. That was the project. And if he kept it practical, he'd be done by noon. He opened the box. The first thing he saw was a spiral notebook, red, the kind that cost 89 cents at the drugstore. He picked it up and opened it to the first page. His mother had written a grocery list on it in the careful, slightly formal handwriting she used for anything official. The list was dated at the top. She'd always dated her lists. He remembered that. She'd been methodical about it. And the date was 1993, which meant he was 7 years old when this list was written. He looked at the items. He looked at the things that were crossed out. He stood in his mother's kitchen with the red spiral notebook in his hands and the November morning outside the window, and felt something arrive in his chest that he wasn't prepared for. If a story like this one, not a tragedy, just a Saturday morning and a box of papers, makes you stop for a moment, subscribe. We look at real human situations here, the ones that arrive without warning. His name was Marcus Webb, and he was 41, and he had, by any reasonable accounting, a good life. He worked in IT infrastructure for a healthcare company. Not the most exciting work, but steady and decently paid. The kind of job that allows a person to live without the specific anxiety of not knowing where the rent is coming from, which he'd come to understand in his 30s was not a small thing. He had an apartment in a part of Columbus that had gotten nicer since he'd moved there, which he'd managed by accident rather than investment savvy. He had friends, a social life that required maintenance but held up, a running habit he'd started at 35 that had stuck. His mother was 68, retired from 22 years as a medical billing clerk at a hospital that had merged with a larger system and eliminated her position when she was 63. She'd taken the severance and the pension and had not, as far as Marcus could tell, spent very much time being upset about it. She had her routines and her neighbors and her Tuesday lunches with 2 women she'd known since the early 90s, and she appeared to Marcus, from the outside, to be fine. She had always appeared fine. That was one of the things he'd grown up counting on. He was an only child. His father had left when Marcus was 4, in the way that some fathers leave, not dramatically, not with a fight that explained it, just one day present, and then progressively less present, and then, by the time Marcus was 7, not present in any consistent sense. His mother had not made this a tragedy. She'd made it a fact, one of the flat, practical facts of their particular life, and she'd organized around it with the competence of a woman who had decided that the organizing was the thing she could control, and she would therefore control it thoroughly. They'd lived in an apartment for the first 8 years, and then, when Marcus was 12, his mother had bought a house. A small house, 3 bedrooms, a yard that needed work, in a neighborhood that was neither good nor bad, but that had a school Marcus could walk to. She'd been paying on it for 30 years and owned it now, which was the kind of small, solid fact that Marcus had recently started thinking about differently than he had when he was younger. He'd grown up thinking of his childhood as ordinary. He was starting to understand that ordinary was itself a kind of work, when the underlying circumstances weren't particularly ordinary, and that the work had been done by someone else. He stood in the kitchen with the notebook and started reading. The list from 1993 was 3 pages long. He hadn't known grocery lists could be 3 pages, but this one was, organized by aisle the way his mother had always organized them. Produce, dairy, meat, canned goods, cleaning supplies, a section at the end she'd labeled Other that included things like light bulbs and shoelaces and the occasional gift item. The things that were crossed out with a single clean line, not scribbled over, just one line. The kind you made when you were acknowledging a decision. He went through them. A bottle of wine, crossed out. A specific brand of olive oil, the good kind, crossed out and replaced with a note in smaller writing, generic. Okay. Tylenol PM, crossed out with a note, drugstore brand. Bath salts, the kind that came in a small jar, crossed out. A book, she'd written the title, some novel he didn't recognize, crossed out with a small star next to it, which he would come to understand meant library. Marcus turned the page. On the second page, in a different color pen, she'd come back and added things, or modified things. There were notes in the margins, wait for sale, check circular, and asterisks next to certain items and what appeared to be a running total in the bottom right corner that she'd been adjusting as she went, the numbers slightly smudged where she'd erased and recalculated. He sat down at the kitchen table. His mother called from the living room. "Did you find anything in there worth keeping?" "I don't know yet," he said. He meant it. He went deeper into the box. There were more notebooks, 7 of them, all the same kind, spiral-bound. The 89-cent kind, spanning from 1992 to roughly 2004. She hadn't kept lists in notebooks after that, he found, underneath the notebooks a stack of folded papers that were printed spreadsheets, because at some point she'd moved the system to a computer, and then below that a layer of handwritten lists on regular notebook paper, the informal kind, the quick kind you make at the kitchen counter before you leave. He went through them in order. He found the list from Christmas 1994. He was 8 in 1994. The list was Christmas-specific, a separate sheet tucked into the notebook from that month, written in the careful handwriting she reserved for important things. It had 2 columns. The left column said Kids. The right column said House/Other. The Kids column had 5 items, all circled. He recognized 2 of them. A specific video game he'd wanted badly that year, the one he'd gotten and had talked about for weeks afterward, and a pair of Nikes he'd also gotten, and that had been, he remembered clearly, a big deal. The kind of shoes that other kids at school had been wearing. He'd been asking for them since September. Both items had prices written next to them in small numbers. The House/Other column had 6 items. 5 of them were crossed out. A winter coat, new kitchen faucet, something described as doctor appointment, can wait. Shoes for herself, a specific kind, orthopedic, with a price he now understood was not an extravagance. A specific face cream she'd apparently been using and had noted was running out. One item in the House/Other column was not crossed out. It said, property tax, must. He sat at the table for a long time with the Christmas list. He thought about the Nikes. He thought about how he'd opened that box and the particular feeling of it, the specific, clean happiness of a kid who'd gotten the thing he'd asked for, the thing other kids had, the thing that meant something in the social economy of 3rd grade. He'd run around the living room in the Nikes. He'd worn them to school the first day back from break. He hadn't thought about the list. He hadn't known about the list. He was 8. 8-year-olds don't know about lists. That was the point. That was the entire, specific, deliberate point, which he could see now in the single line drawn through the winter coat that his mother had needed and had not bought. He heard her in the living room, the television on low, The particular sound of his mother's Saturday morning. He kept reading. He called his friend Derek that afternoon from his car in his mother's driveway. He'd been in the house for 4 hours, and he needed, before he could go back inside and have dinner with her and talk about the cabinet and what she wanted to keep, to say the thing to someone who would just let him say it. Derek picked up on the second ring. "How's your mom?" "She's fine," Marcus said.
"I found some stuff."
"What kind of stuff?" "Grocery lists," Marcus said. He said it and heard how it sounded. They're grocery lists from when I was a kid. She had 7 notebooks of them." A pause. "That's a lot of groceries," Derek said. "She crossed things out," Marcus said. "Her stuff. Every list."
"There's always things crossed out that are hers, and there's never things crossed out that are mine."
He stopped. "She bought me Nikes for Christmas when I was 8. You know what she crossed off her own list to do that?" "What?" "A winter coat." Derek was quiet. "She crossed off a winter coat," Marcus said again. Not because Derek hadn't heard him, because saying it twice was the only way to make it feel real. "Marcus," Derek said. "I knew we didn't have a lot of money," Marcus said. "I knew that. I wasn't naive about it. But I thought it was just a fact, like a background fact. I didn't know it had this detail." "Did you know about the coat?" "Of course not. That was the whole point. She made sure I didn't know about the coat." He looked at his mother's house through the windshield. The front porch, the door she'd painted a specific shade of red the summer he was in high school, the window of the living room with the light on. "She spent 20 years making sure I didn't know about the coat." He went back inside. His mother had made something for dinner, the chicken thing she made when he came over on Saturdays, the one with the lemon and the herbs, the one he'd been eating since he was 12, and that he'd tried to replicate in his own apartment twice and hadn't quite gotten right. She was at the stove when he came in. He sat at the kitchen table. The box was still there. "Did you get through it?" she said. "Most of it," he said. She turned to look at him. She had the assessment look she'd always had, the one that could read a room in seconds, that had known when he was lying since he was 6, that had never fully gone away even now that he was 41. "You found the notebooks," she said. "Yes." She turned back to the stove. "I forgot those were in there," she said. Marcus looked at the notebooks stacked on the table where he'd left them. "Did you?" he said. A pause. "Not entirely," she said. She stirred something. "I knew they were there. I just stopped thinking about what was in them." "Why did you keep them?" She was quiet for a moment. He knew her silences, had been reading them his whole life. This one was the kind that meant she was deciding how much to say. "I don't know," she said. "I'm not sure I had a reason. I just couldn't throw them away." She brought the chicken to the table and sat across from him, and they ate the way they usually ate, talking about his week, about her Tuesday lunch, about a thing the neighbor had done with his lawn that she had opinions about. The chicken was the same as it always was. The dinner was comfortable. But he kept looking at the notebooks on the end of the table, and she kept not looking at them, and both of them knew the other was doing it. After dinner, he did the dishes. This was a practice he'd started in his early 30s, late enough to count as something he'd arrived at rather than been raised to do. He'd started doing it without being asked, and his mother had, after the 3rd or 4th time, stopped trying to wave him off. He was at the sink and she was at the table with her tea, the way they sometimes ended up in the evenings. And it was the specific domestic ease of two people who knew the geography of each other's habits. He said, "The Christmas list from 1994. His mother held her tea. "The Nikes," he said. "You loved those shoes," she said. "You crossed off a winter coat." The kitchen was quiet. Outside, a car went by. The dishwater was warm. Your coat was fine, she said. You had a coat. But yours? Mine was fine too, she said. I layered. He stood at the sink with his hands in the water. He thought about his mother in the winter of 1994, which would have been January and February, the specific Ohio cold of those months. He tried to remember her coat from that winter. He couldn't remember her coat. He could remember the Nikes. He could remember the video game. He could remember the specific feeling of going back to school after Christmas break and showing Deshawn, who sat next to him in 3rd grade, what he'd gotten. He couldn't remember whether his mother's coat had been warm enough. I didn't know, he said. You weren't supposed to know, she said. He turned off the water. He dried his hands on the dish towel, the one with the faded pattern, the one that had probably been on that hook for 15 years. He turned around. His mother was looking at her tea. Can I ask you something? He said. You can always ask me something, she said. Why did you keep the notebooks? She looked up at him. She looked at him the way she'd looked at him his whole life, the full, complete attention of a woman who had organized her life around this person and was not ashamed of that, and had also never let it become a burden he had to carry. I don't know, she said again, but this time it didn't sound like she didn't know. It sounded like she wasn't sure she could say. Mom, he said. She set down her tea. I think I wanted to remember, she said. Not to show anyone, just I wanted there to be a record somewhere that it happened, that I did it. She looked at the table. Not in a, I wasn't keeping score. I just wanted to remember what those years cost, and also what they were worth. Both things. He sat back down across from her. They looked at each other across the kitchen table, which was the same table that had been there since he was in high school, the one she'd bought at a furniture store and had assembled herself because the delivery fee was extra. Tell me about the other lists, he said. Drop a comment below. When's the last time you thought about what your childhood actually cost someone? Sometimes it's the small things, the things you didn't know were crossed off, that change how you see the whole picture. We'll be here, she told him. Not all of it at once. She was not, by nature, a person who made speeches. She'd always been a person who handed you information in useful portions, the way she'd once handed him his lunch, complete and organized and exactly what was needed. She talked the way she'd lived, practically, clearly, without drama. She told him about the grocery system. She'd started keeping the notebooks when he was 6. She'd had a budget she worked to, a specific number she'd arrived at by calculating what was left after rent and utilities and his school costs and the savings she put aside every month. A small amount, but consistent. The budget for food and household was what remained. She'd worked it like a problem to be solved. The system with the crossed-out items had been intentional. She'd go through the circular on Wednesdays, plan the week, and then go through the list and identify the things that were wants rather than needs. Not his wants. Those weren't the category she reviewed. Hers. A bottle of wine she'd wanted for a recipe that wasn't essential to the recipe. The good olive oil when the generic worked. Bath salts. She'd mentioned these and smiled, a rueful smile. The smile of someone remembering a small, persistent defeat. I liked a bath at night, she said. It helped me sleep. The plain soap worked fine. But I always wrote the bath salts on the list, and I almost always crossed them off. He thought about his mother at night, in the apartment and then in the house, alone after he was in bed, a bath that helped her sleep. How often did you buy them? He said. She thought about it. Birthday, she said. Sometimes Christmas, maybe once or twice when things were better for a month. She paused. I bought the drugstore brand eventually, and that was fine. He thought about the drugstore brand notation in the 1993 list. Generic okay. He'd read it as a practical decision. He understood now that it was also a small grief. The specific small grief of a woman who'd wanted the real thing, and had found a way to be okay with the replacement. "Tell me about the book," he said. She looked at him. "The novel," he said. "You had a list. The novel was crossed out with a star that meant library." She smiled. This smile was different from the other one, warmer, a little surprised. "You went through all of them," she said. "I went through all of them," he said. She said, "The library was free. I read a lot of library books." "Did you like that, or did you want to own them?" She thought about this honestly. "I liked the library," she said. "I did, but there were some books I wanted to keep, the ones I wanted to go back to. Those I usually waited. If I still wanted them 2 or 3 months later, I'd see if they went on sale." She paused. "Some of them I waited for years." He thought about the notebooks, the patient accounting, the cross-outs and the stars, and the waiting for sale notations, and the running totals she'd erased and recalculated in the bottom corners. He thought about his mother in the apartment, in the house, at the kitchen table with the circular and the notebook, doing the weekly math. He thought about her doing this quietly, efficiently, without complaint, after he was in bed, making it look easy when it was not easy. "You made it look so normal," he said. "It was normal," she said. "It wasn't," he said. "I know that now. I didn't know it then, but I know it now." She looked at her tea. "That was the point," she said. He stayed later than usual. He called it helping her sort. There was still the question of the box and what she wanted to do with the contents. But what they were actually doing was sitting at the kitchen table going through the notebooks together, which had happened without either of them suggesting it. She would pick one up and open it, and he would lean over, and she would say what she remembered about that month, that year, what was going on in their life at the time. The list from April 1998 had a notation he didn't understand. M, piano. Ask school. He asked. She looked at it for a moment. "You'd mentioned wanting to take piano lessons," she said. "Do you remember that?" He did not remember that. "You were 12. You'd been in the school music room during lunch with a couple of other kids, and the teacher had let you try the piano, and you came home and said you thought you might want to learn." She looked at the notation. "The private lessons were $40 an hour. I looked into the school's after-school program. They had a program." "Did I do it?" he said. She looked at him. "You changed your mind by May," she said. "You decided you wanted to do baseball instead." He thought about the summer he was 12, the baseball summer, the cleats she'd bought him. "I didn't know you were looking into it," he said. "You mentioned it once," she said. "I looked into it." He sat with that. He thought about all the things he'd mentioned once and then changed his mind about. The way 12-year-olds change their minds, the way children move through interests with the easy mobility of people who don't know yet what things cost. He thought about his mother writing M, piano, ask school on a grocery list, and calling the school and figuring out whether it was possible, and then watching him change his mind and not saying a word about it. "You never told me when I changed my mind about things," he said. "Why would I?" she said. "Kids change their minds. That's what they're supposed to do." "But you'd already looked into it." "That was my job," she said, "looking into things." He looked at the notebook. He thought about a word he'd heard once in a podcast he'd half listened to while driving. The word was invisible labor. The work that gets done that nobody sees, that holds the visible things up. He'd heard it and thought of it as an abstract concept, one of those phrases that people applied to situations in general. He was holding, in his hands, the documented record of 30 years of invisible labor. Not abstract. Specific. Dated. Cross-referenced. Running totals in pencil in the bottom corners. The notebook from 2001 was different from the others. He noticed it when he picked it up. It was thicker, fuller, and when he opened it, he saw that it wasn't just lists. She'd written in the margins sometimes, small notations that weren't about food or budget, just thoughts or observations or things she'd wanted to remember.
He read one that said, M made the honor roll.
His face. He read one that said, hard week. Okay. He read one that said, phone call from R today. His father's name was Robert. He'd been called R in a grocery notebook notation on a Tuesday in 2001, and Marcus thought about what that meant, what kind of week that had been, what his mother had been managing in the margin of a grocery list. He didn't ask about that one. Some things he understood without needing them explained. He read one that said, tomorrow is better. It always is. He set the notebook down. He looked at his mother across the table.
She was looking at the notebook, not at him. She had the expression she had when she was somewhere else. Not sad exactly, but inside something. I didn't know you wrote in them, he said. Occasionally, she said, when I had something I needed to put somewhere. Tomorrow is better, he said. She looked at him. It always was, she said. That's just a fact. He looked at her. She was 68 years old, his mother, in the same kitchen she'd had for 30 years, with the same dish towel on the hook and the same table and the tea she drank every evening and the specific quality of her stillness that he'd been reading his whole life and had sometimes taken for granted and was not taking for granted tonight. Can I tell you something? He said. You can always tell me something, she said. I've been thinking about the wrong things, he said. When I think about my childhood, I've been thinking about the things I had, the house, the food, the shoes I wanted. I've been thinking about the results without thinking about how they got made. He paused. I didn't know about the work. You weren't supposed to, she said. I know, he said, but I know now. She looked at the table. I'm not, she started. I'm not showing you these because I want you to feel bad about it. I didn't show them to you. You found them. I know. I made the choices I made because they were the right choices, she said. The coat was fine. I was fine. You were what mattered. You mattered too, he said. She looked at him. I know that, she said. But the bath salts, he said. She made a sound, not quite a laugh, but the beginning of one. The specific sound she made when she was acknowledging something she'd kept small for a long time. The bath salts, she said. You crossed them off 100 times. Probably, she said. And you bought the drugstore brand. The drugstore brand was fine, she said. Mom, Marcus. They looked at each other across the kitchen table. Thank you, he said. Not, thank you for everything you did for me. Not the general version, the birthday card version, the version that was true but had no weight to it. He said, thank you for the Nikes. Thank you for the piano research, even though I changed my mind. Thank you for the specific brand of cereal I liked that was more expensive than the generic and that was never crossed off any of the lists I looked at. Thank you for the library books that kept you from having the ones you wanted to own. He stopped. He thought about what else he'd seen in the notebooks, the specific small things that had never been crossed out when they were his. Thank you for working out the math every week so I wouldn't know there was math to work out. His mother was looking at the table. She pressed her lips together, a gesture he'd known since childhood, the one she made when she was deciding something. You're welcome, she said. He drove to 3 stores on Sunday morning. Not a big gesture. He'd thought about whether to make it big, had imagined briefly some version of a major gift, a significant sum, something that announced itself as repayment, and had understood quickly that that version was wrong, that it was for him more than for her, that the thing she'd been doing all her life was specifically not making him feel like a transaction, and turning it into one now would miss the point entirely. He bought 3 things. The first was the bath salts. Not the drugstore brand,
The real kind, from the small bath shop in his neighborhood. The kind that cost more than she'd allowed herself. The kind with the good smell. He asked the person working there which kind was the most luxurious, which was a question he'd never asked in a store in his life. And she showed him 3 options, and he bought the one she said was the nicest. The second was a book. He'd gone through the list from 1997, the one with the starred notation next to a novel, and he'd written down the title and looked it up. It was a novel from the late 80s by an author he didn't know, the kind of book that had been a specific thing someone had wanted to read, and then had found at the library, and then had apparently never gotten around to buying for herself. He found it used online and expedited the shipping so it would arrive during the week. The third thing he bought at the regular grocery store. He walked to the olive oil aisle and stood in front of the olive oil for a few minutes, and then bought the specific brand she'd crossed off in 1993 and replaced with generic. Okay, he didn't know if she still used olive oil. He didn't know if this was the brand she still wanted, but he bought it because it was specific, because it was the crossed-out item, because the whole point was the crossing out. He drove back to her house. She was surprised when he came back on a Sunday. "Did you forget something?" she said at the door. "No," he said. "I brought you some things." She looked at the bag. He handed her the bath salts first. She looked at them. She turned the jar over in her hands. She smelled them. He watched her hold the jar near her face and close her eyes for just a second. The way you smell something you've been wanting. "Marcus," she said. "The good kind," he said. "This is too much." "It's bath salts," he said. "It's not too much. It's bath salts that should have been on the list 30 years ago and weren't." She held the jar. He handed her the olive oil. She looked at it. Then she looked at him. "You went through the lists," she said. "I went through the lists," he said. "You found the 1993 one." "I found the 1993 one," he said. She looked at the olive oil with the expression of someone who has been found out in something private and doesn't quite know how to be seen in it. Not embarrassed exactly, more like undefended. The look of someone who has spent a long time managing how much other people see. "I cross out a lot of things," she said. "I know," he said. "I read all of them." She set the olive oil down on the side table. "The book is coming in the mail," he said. "A few days." She looked at him. "What book?" "The one with the star," he said. "The library notation, 1997. Her face changed. He watched it happen, not dramatically, not with tears, just the specific shift of a person who has been seen in something specific and true. She looked at him, and he looked at her, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. "That's why I did it." She made tea. He sat at the kitchen table again, the second day in a row, the same table, the notebook stacked where he'd left them. She asked, with her back to him while the kettle heated, Was it upsetting, going through them?" He thought about the right word. "It was clarifying," he said. She turned to look at him. "I always thought I understood my childhood," he said. "I thought I understood what kind of life we had. I knew we were careful with money. I knew things were sometimes tight, but I thought of it as a situation, like weather, a condition we were in." He paused. "I didn't understand that the condition had a manager, someone who was working it every week." She brought the tea to the table. "It wasn't work," she said. "It was work," he said. "It was very organized, consistent, documented work. You have 7 notebooks of evidence." She almost smiled. "I like systems," she said. "I know," he said. "I get it from you." She looked at him. That landed differently than he'd expected. Her face did the thing it did sometimes, the brief, unguarded thing, and she looked out the window. "I worried," she said. "Sometimes. That you knew more than I thought you knew, that you could feel it, the tightness, even if I didn't say anything. I don't think I could, he said. Honestly, I think you were good at it. You shouldn't have had to not feel it, she said. Kids notice things. I wanted you to feel normal. I wanted the house to feel normal. I wanted you to be able to ask for the Nikes, and I wanted to figure out the Nikes. She paused. I wanted the math to be invisible. It was, he said. It was completely invisible. I had no idea there was math. She nodded. She turned her teacup in her hands. She stopped. What? I also didn't want you to feel grateful in a way that felt heavy, she said. Do you know what I mean? I didn't want you walking around with the weight of what it cost. Kids should be able to ask for things. They shouldn't be calculating whether they're allowed to want something. He thought about that. He thought about himself at 8, at 12, at 16, asking for things and getting them or not getting them, and never once, not once in the whole of it, feeling the weight of what the asking cost. She'd done that deliberately. She'd managed not just the money, but the emotional environment around the money. She'd organized things so that he could want things without guilt and receive them without debt and grow up without the particular heaviness of knowing you were someone's sacrifice. That was more than the lists, he said. That was the whole job, she said. He picked up the notebook from 2003. He was 15 in 2003. He'd been at the high school for a year. He'd started to cost more in the specific ways that 15-year-olds cost more. School things, social things, the beginning of wanting clothes that were about something more than just clothes. He flipped through the lists. He found the one from March. It was longer than most. She'd been shopping for a birthday party. His 16th was in March, and the list included things for the party. He scanned it. His eyes stopped. In the house/other section of the March list, crossed out was dentist, overdue. He looked at it. He looked at the date. He thought about 2003. He thought about himself at 15, turning 16, with a party his mother was planning. Mom, he said. She looked at the notebook. She saw what he'd found. She picked up her tea. My teeth were fine, she said. Were they? A pause. I had some sensitivity, she said. I'd been putting off going in. The copay was higher than I wanted it to be that month. Because of the party. Because of a lot of things, she said. The party was one thing. It wasn't just the party. But you crossed it off, he said. I went in April, she said. It was fine. He set the notebook down. He thought about his 16th birthday party. He could remember it clearly. 15 or 16 kids from school, a cake his mother had made from scratch because she'd said the bakery cakes were dry, which was true, but which he now understood was not the only reason. He remembered thinking the party was good. He remembered being happy about it. He remembered not thinking, not once, about what it had displaced. His mother had had a dental sensitivity issue and had put it off for a month for his party. He wasn't going to say this was the most significant thing he'd found. He'd found a winter coat, a novel, years of bath salts, a specific brand of olive oil, a piano inquiry for a 12-year-old who'd changed his mind. He'd found small grief after small grief, each one crossed out with a single clean line, each one representing a moment when she'd looked at what she wanted and what he needed, and had made the same choice, consistently, for 20 years. But the dentist, for some reason, was the one that landed in his chest and stayed there. Because it was her body. Because it was pain, small, manageable, but pain, that she'd postponed. Because he'd stood at his birthday party, eating the cake she'd made from scratch, and had not known. He had not known about any of it. I wish I'd known, he said. Not so I could have fixed it. I was 15, I couldn't have fixed anything. But I wish I'd known it was hard. I wish I'd been allowed to know it was hard sometimes. His mother looked at the table. You were allowed to know I worked hard, she said. I didn't hide that. I just didn't make it a tragedy. I know, he said. But the tragedy was there. You just handled it so I didn't have to see it. That was the point, she said, for the third time. And for the third time, he understood differently than he had the first 2 times. The point had been protection. Specific, consistent, documented protection. The entire system, the notebooks, the crossouts, the running totals, the generic substitutions and library stars and single clean lines had been a shield. A shield she'd been holding for 20 years so he wouldn't have to know it was there. He called Derek again on Monday morning. How'd it go? Derek said. Good, Marcus said. Hard. Good. He thought about how to describe it. You know how you have a picture of something in your head and you think it's accurate, and then someone shows you more of the image and you realize you were looking at a cropped version? Yeah, Derek said. My whole childhood, Marcus said. I thought I was seeing the full picture. I was seeing the cropped version, the version she'd cropped for me. What was in the part you couldn't see? Marcus thought about the notebooks, the 7 notebooks in the box in the kitchen, the hundreds of lists, the thousands of crossouts, the margins where she'd written, "Tomorrow is better," and M made the honor roll. His face. Work, he said. Just an enormous amount of work. Quiet work. The kind that looks like nothing because it was done so well. Derek was quiet for a moment. You okay? He said. Yeah, Marcus said. Better than okay, actually. I feel like I know her better. I feel like I know something real. He paused. I've been thanking her wrong my whole life. I've been saying thanks for everything, and not knowing what the everything was. Now I know what the everything was. What are you going to do with that? He thought about the bath salts on her bathroom shelf now, the olive oil on her counter, the book arriving in the mail. Start thanking her for the specific things, he said, while there's time. The book arrived on a Wednesday. He didn't know it had arrived until she called him on Thursday morning. I got a package, she said. I know, he said. A pause. Marcus? Her voice was different. He knew all her voice's different versions, and this one was the version that meant she was feeling something she hadn't planned to feel. It came out in 1988. How did you find it? I wrote down the title from the list, he said. The star meant library. Another pause. I know what the star meant, she said. I know you know, he said. Silence on the line. The particular silence of a woman who has spent decades being the organized one, the capable one, the one who managed things so other people didn't have to, being seen in something small and true and private. It's a good book, she said finally. I know, he said. You'd been wanting it for 6 years. 7, she said. I saw a review in 1987. He was smiling at his kitchen window before he knew he was doing it. Did you look through the whole package? He said. I haven't opened it yet, she said. I'm looking at it. Open it. He heard her doing it, the sound of the packaging, the paper, the careful way she opened things. His mother had always opened packages carefully, hadn't torn into them, had saved the wrapping when the wrapping was nice. There's a note, she said. He'd written it on a card he'd spent too long choosing in the drugstore, finally picking the plainest one, because some things don't need decoration. He'd written, for all the things you crossed off so mine could stay on. I've been carrying these without knowing it my whole life. Thank you for making sure I didn't know. She didn't say anything for a long moment. He waited.
"I was just doing what mattered," she said. Her voice was different from what it usually was, the version without the management in it. "I know," he said. "That's what made it invisible." "Marcus, you don't have to say anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know I saw it. All of it." The line was quiet. He thought about his mother at her kitchen table in 1993, 1997, 2001, working the math in the notebook, making the crossouts, adding the star for library, writing "tomorrow is better" in the margin at the end of a hard week. He thought about 30 years of Wednesdays with the store circular, 30 years of running totals in pencil, 30 years of choosing him before she chose herself, without making it something he had to carry. "You should have the bath salts every month from now on," he said. "Not for your birthday, just because." A sound from her end of the line that was something between a laugh and something else. "They are very good bath salts," she said. "I know," he said. "I asked which kind was the nicest." "I can tell," she said. He stood in his kitchen on a Thursday morning, listening to his mother smile, and thought about the notebooks in the box, the 7 years of evidence, the 7 notebooks that had been sitting in a kitchen cabinet for 20 years because she'd kept them and hadn't known why except that she'd wanted there to be a record somewhere that it had happened.
There was a record. He'd read it. He was going to keep reading it. He went back the following Saturday, not because anything needed doing. The cabinet was sorted, the box was organized. The practical reason for the visits had been resolved. He went because it was Saturday and his mother was there, and he'd been going on Saturdays for 6 years without analyzing it, and he'd understood something this week about why things that don't need analysis are sometimes the most valuable things. He brought the good coffee, not the grocery store kind, the place in his neighborhood that she'd mentioned once, months ago, when she'd said the coffee at his apartment was better than hers, and he'd said it was from a specific place, and she'd said it sounded good, and he'd noted it down. She said, "You went to the coffee place." "You mentioned it in February," he said. She looked at the coffee cup. "You remember things," she said. "I'm learning to," he said. They sat at the kitchen table and drank the good coffee, and she told him about her Tuesday lunch, and he told her about a thing at work, and they talked for 2 hours about nothing that would have seemed significant from the outside, and that was, from the inside, the entire point. He washed the cups before he left. She walked him to the door. "The notebooks," she said. He looked at her. "I want you to have them," she said. "When you want them. Not now necessarily, but eventually." He thought about the notebooks, the 7 red spirals with the 89-cent price tags, the most detailed document of love he'd ever encountered. "You sure?" he said. "I kept them for a reason," she said. "I think the reason was you." He stood on her porch in the November light. He thought about the boy who'd gotten the Nikes and had run around the living room in them and had not known about the winter coat. He thought about the boy who'd come home from the school music room and said he thought he might want to learn piano, and whose mother had written M piano, ask school in the margin, and had called the school and had watched him change his mind and had never said a word. He thought about who he was made of. He knew better now. "I'll take good care of them," he said. "I know you will," she said. "You always have. You just didn't know what you were taking care of." He hugged her at the door, the full kind, both arms, the kind you didn't rush. When he pulled back, she was looking at him with the expression she'd had since he was small, the complete attention, the full seeing, the look that had never once been anything other than his mother looking at him and knowing exactly what she saw. "Go home," she said. "Drive carefully." "I will," he said. He walked to his car. He drove home through the November streets, the bare trees and the gray sky, and the particular quality of a late morning that was moving toward afternoon. And he thought about love that lived in notebooks and cross-outs and starred notations and running totals in pencil. Love that had organized itself quietly around a single consistent purpose and had asked for nothing in return except that the person it was for got to grow up not knowing it was there. He knew now. He wasn't going to make her feel like it was a debt, but he was going to know. He was going to know what the Saturdays meant, and what the coffee meant, and what the walking through the door to her kitchen meant. And he was going to bring the good coffee and notice what she mentioned and write it down like she had always written things down, because she'd spent 20 years teaching him that the small, specific things were the whole thing. And he'd been a slow student, but he was paying attention now. He was paying attention now. If this story gave you something, even just the thought of someone in your life who's been doing the invisible work, the crossed-out work, the work that looked like nothing because it was done so well, leave a word in the comments. You don't have to explain it. Sometimes just saying, "I see it," is enough. Someone will see it. We'll be here.